The internet. What's going on? Jake Pavorsky of Liberty Ballers here today, trying to revive the Hoops Hangout. This is our first time doing this in over 2 years, really. We haven't done this in a while. I used to go back and watch our old ones when I would fawn over Rodney Hood and guys like that, and we would have a great old time. And we're trying to bring it back this year. Joined today by Jake Fischer, who used to hang out with me on the old Hoops Hangouts. Jake, what's going on?
Let's get this straight. You used to hang out with me on the old Hangouts. That was my thing.
It was we can call it a joint operation. How does that sound?
I was definitely the host, though, and you and Roy kind of came on
true.
my show. Let's be honest.
My memory's a little hazy. That's a long time ago. All I know is the Hoops Hangout is now my baby, and we're sharing this together right now. We're reconnecting.
It's a changing of the guard from Jake to Jake.
Yes, basically. And there's been a lot of changing of the guard from the Sixers as well. So we'll try and cut the 2 years down basically into the past 6 months. Sam Hinkie obviously resigns. Brian Colangelo was brought in to take over as president and general manager. And the theme seemed to be that the team was going to start competing now. They were going to stop tanking, stop trying to play for a top pick, and focus more on generating wins now in an effort to push towards the playoffs. They signed guys like Sergio Rodriguez, Jared Bayless during the offseason. They drafted Ben Simmons. They finally brought over Dario Saric. Joel Embiid was finally ready to play. Seemed like everything was going to go great. Ben Simmons breaks his foot. Jared Bayless does something with his wrist. Not really sure at this point what's going on with him still. And the Sixers are not looking as competitive as people thought they would be, as certainly as management would like them to be. And kind of reminds you of the Hinkie days a little bit. The Sixers are 0-7, and it's been ugly. It has not been pretty in any sense, other than the games when Joel Embiid has been on the floor and he's looked fantastic. But, Jay, give me a quick synopsis of what you think the first 7 games have been like.
Well, this is exactly why we're doing this right now, because I wouldn't exactly label them as being ugly. They've put together some nice stretches of basketball, and I understand the sentiment that it's a nightmare and it's a struggle and they're 0-7 and they look like they're going to be winless again until December. But when they were in the Thunder game, the Magic game, if Embiid doesn't stumble and that ball trickles to Ibaka and TJ McConnell doesn't tackle him like he's Jordan Hicks, that's a win. And a couple shots fall last night against the Pacers. That's a win too.
Right.
So I think we've been focused on process over results for the last 3 years in terms of team building. I think that belief has to also translate into now the game-to-game process as well.
Right. So we'll talk about, obviously you just mentioned the Pacers game, and I think that's sort of been a microcosm of the early season for the Sixers, because played great in the beginning of the game, shot the ball really well, probably their best game shooting from three so far this year, holding a 6-point lead with 1:30 left thanks to a Dario Saric jumper. And then things start to go downhill fast. Jeff Teague knocks down 2 free throws. Sixers come down the court. Sergio Rodriguez, who couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat, throws up a floater, completely misses the rim. Pacers come back down the floor. Jeff Teague left wide open for a 3, cuts it to a 1-point deficit. Sixers come back down. Brett Brown draws up a Jahlil Okafor ISO, which doesn't do anything for Okafor, but Rodriguez does get open, and I think what did he shoot? 1 of 14, 1 of 13, something like that. He was horrendous, and he ends up missing another 3. So now they come back down the floor, and Sergio Rodriguez is forced to defend Jeff Teague, and Jeff Teague blows by him. He knocks down a floater. The Pacers go up 1 point, and now the Sixers come back down. I don't know if they drew up anything. That play was a mess. All I can say is that the play that resulted in their final clutch bucket was one that probably should not have came. And Gerald Henderson,
they turned garbage into gold for sure.
Yeah, Dario, sneaking into the lane and sort of setting a screen on Gerald Henderson's man, which it was inadvertent. It certainly wasn't planned, but Henderson had the smarts to come up to the wing, come get the ball and knock down a 3. So that was a great clutch play by him so far. And he's caught a lot of flack for some of his late game decision making, whether it's his fault or not. So Pacers come back down the floor, now down 2. Paul George hits a quick jumper off an inbound. Pretty well defended. I think Dario did a good job switching out on him. That's just Paul George being Paul George.
Also, you watch that replay so many times on the broadcast. It looked like Paul George was going to drive. And conventional wisdom says you go to the rim, you try to get fouled or make the bucket.
Yeah.
And Paul just caught him on his heels and shot it. So, yes, it was a pretty solid defensive play.
Can't blame Dario there. Can't blame. I think it was Covington who got picked off there. Just a well-drawn play by Nate McMillan and his gang. So Sixers have a chance to win it. 3.9 seconds left. They call another isolation for Okafor, basically. Okafor comes to get the ball off a rub screen from Henderson that Henderson set on Miles Turner, creating a little space. Okafor comes out a little too far to get it. He's standing basically on the three-point line on the baseline. By the time he's ready to go, there's not enough time on the clock for him to really take a drive to the lane. He chucks up an awful jumper. Sixers are forced to go to overtime. They get wiped out in overtime. The overtime's a mess. You knew it was coming. Sixers fall to 0-7. So I think we are on two different ends of the spectrum in terms of what we think is – I don't want to say that – all right, I'll just say it like this. We're on two different ends of the spectrum in terms of what we think is causing issue. You still think that it's mostly talent, and I agree that there is a portion of it that is definitely talent-related. Obviously, not having Ben Simmons, not having Jared Bayless sucks, and those are guys you expect to contribute for you. But when you see the same issues happening over and over again, consistently from last year to as well into this year, it's happened in 4 games already where the Sixers are holding late-game leads only to falter and lose either in regulation or overtime. I think some of that has to eventually fall in the coaching, but I wanted to hear your take in sort of an in-depth take about what you think is really the core of the issue here, because clearly you don't think it's Brett Brown.
I don't. And before we even get into the late game minutes, look at the fourth quarter where they fell down 7. Their ability to immediately respond, and I don't know exactly what the run was, 18-6, something like that, to go up 6, to even be in the position to be up 6 with 1:30 left. The fact that Brett Brown has consistently done that versus the Thunder, versus the Magic in games previously, he's been able to do 1 or 2 minor adjustments, a substitution, a play coming out of a timeout that sparks some momentum to respond to a run. To me, is impressive enough as it is just with this talent level that he has. Number 2, down the stretch, a lot of these plays over the last couple of games, they've gotten good looks. I agree the Okafor look was a little suspect, but he's arguably the most talented offensive player on the team that night with Joel Embiid. Not even in, I can't even say on the bench. He wasn't even in Indianapolis. So to theoretically put your best player in space, one-on-one, he had the entire floor by himself with about 4 seconds left. There's not too much more you can ask out of an NBA coach. Obviously, Okafor really flubbed the play and took a terrible shot, got a horrible position. That's another thing we got to talk about his footwork and ability to do that. But I feel like that comes down to talent and the ability. Like that Sergio Rodriguez floater he missed was off of a pick-and-roll play at Brown design, which Joel Okafor did not set the screen. But still, he got 5 feet from the rim and just couldn't put it in. I think if you actually – a lot of people are definitely on Twitter looking at the box score and saying, oh, he shot 1 of 14, not looking at the shots he actually took. I think it's really hard to blame Brett Brown when a lot of the looks that he's drawn up, especially Joel Embiid in games late, like the Thunder game and a couple other games, the shots just aren't falling. That's not his fault. And I think the cries are just a snowball effect of all the last years of despair.
And I definitely agree with you on some points. My thing is that obviously the Sixers are lacking in talent. I would say at best they have a mediocre roster. That's probably generous to say. Would be generous to say that they have a mediocre. Maybe when they're fully healthy, that roster is still mediocre. Anyway, I believe that a good coach needs to A, know his personnel for sure, and B, be able to put his guys in a position to perform, especially when you're lacking in talent. And I don't think Brett has adequately been able to do that so far. I'm not putting all the blame on him. The Sergio Rodriguez floater there, you got to be able to make stuff like that. But when you're either down points or you're tied and you have a last possession like that and you need to draw a quick hit or a good play to get guys in motion and free up space, I just think that Brett has lacked creativity in that sense. And you look at Jahlil coming to get that ball. There's obviously we've been pretty forward in expressing that are a dislike of some of the aspects of Okafor's game, and some of it for him being such a post-dominant player in the sense that he loves playing out of the post. He can't really do much else. He's not a guy who can establish great post position. So you're asking for him.
It's pretty ironic.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, honestly. But this is what happens when you come up against bigger, stronger NBA players. You don't really see that at the college level. But anyway, you're asking him to make a play there. And first off, you're doing it out of the baseline, too, in a weird angle where Okafor's not really used to working. What he usually does is he works the foul line, the extended foul line, and he drives and stuff like that. So you're asking him to work out of a weird angle against Miles Turner, who's a great defender, and far away from the basket too, with not that much time.
Great's a strong word for a second-year player.
He's a solid defender. I would. Who's a better defender, Miles Turner or Jahlil Okafor?
Miles Turner, of course.
Okay.
But
Right. Miles Turner is one of the better defending young big men out there, I would say.
But
regardless, go ahead. If you want to debate on this, go
yeah,
ahead.
You said you want Brett Brown to get his players in space to make a play creatively. That last play, the last couple of games, the Sixers have gotten the ball in the hands of Joel Henderson to win the game, correct? In last night's last second opportunity, they drew up a set that was pretty much designed. I didn't know what happened, but when I watched it this morning, it looked like Okafor was going to set a down screen to get Henderson the ball. But instead, after Okafor screened Henderson curled back and screened for Okafor to get him the ball in space, one-on-one. That's exactly what you asked him to do.
But
that was a creative way to get an offensively talented player in a one-on-one opportunity in space. Like, I don't know where you are.
But you do it in a weird spot away from the basket with little time on the clock that I don't think plays to his strengths.
I think the spot was on Okafor. I think he could have easily gotten more towards the middle of the floor instead of on the baseline if he fought for position correctly.
Right, and I had this argument with Derek Bauer on Twitter. He definitely should have been able to seal off Turner, but at the same time, momentum's going to come bring you to the ball, and I think you have to know your personnel. You have to know the strengths and weaknesses of your players. And you have to know that Jahlil is not a guy who can establish good position, and he's not a guy that works quickly. So you're asking him to try and get a quick bucket, try and make a quick drive to the lane and get something up. And to do that from the baseline, and you also have Paul George standing in the middle of the lane protecting it because that's where Joel Henderson wanders after the bucket. That is asking him a lot. You're asking to do that a lot, and I just don't think that was going to work.
What would you? This is what I wanted. I don't want to get in all these conversations with people on Twitter, so I'll ask you. Like, what would you rather him do? What other player in what other spot on the floor do you think would have so much greater potential to actually get you a buck in that scenario?
In terms of Okafor or in terms of the team in general? What
other player on the Sixers do you want, and where do you want them to get the ball in that situation? Because I really don't see much better options.
I mean, I think in that situation you have to try and work it for a shooter, and I would say Henderson, and I know people would hate that because he's taken poor shots at the end of games, although those were broken plays. He had to create something quickly. He was just trying to get a buck. I think he was dominating in the post. He was shooting the ball well. I think you have to try and set a stagger screen or something to get him moving, something to free him up, and then have guys cut around off ball. The issue with that play is that Jahlil is your one option on there. It's either him from a tough spot or nothing. And I remember Brett saying that it was actually the design was either Jahlil ISO or it was a Henderson lob. And I don't know where they were supposed to find the Henderson lob on that. I don't think you have the angle for that at all. But I just think that decision making on Brett's part has been, especially when you look at the Cleveland game, I think it was, where they ran the one set that they ran in the Oklahoma City game where they were down 2 that resulted in a pretty nice look for Embiid. The issue was it took 10 seconds for that play to get going. So they try to run that twice coming out of a timeout. They can't even inbound it the first time. They try and run it a second time with 7 seconds left, and nobody can get open. You're trying to feed the ball through Ersan Ilyasova, who at that point had been with the team for 2 games, doesn't really know the team that well, and you're supposed to feed Embiid over top of Tristan Thompson, who's absolutely clamped on Joel Embiid. I know the options are limited, but at the same time, I just don't think he's playing to the team's strength. And also, you talk about personnel decision-making. Hollis Thompson might have played the game of his life last night. He looked incredible on both ends. He's shooting the ball well. He's driving. He's, active hands on defense. Like, this made me want to love Hollis again. Like, this was like 2013 me, like, really learning how to fall in love with Hollis again. And you leave him off the floor for the last – you leave him off the floor for the last minute.
Hollis Thompson. Like who? Like, he's a fringe NBA player.
But he's one of the few things that is working for you. That him and Covington played great games, shot the ball extremely well. I don't know how you understand how you leave Thompson off the floor, but you don't even try and get a look for one of your shooters who've been really shooting the ball well that night. I think Brett has lacked creativity, and I think he's lacked an understanding of what his guys do best. Even with the situation is late, I know things change late game, but you have to put your guys in a position where they can function in a situation that they're comfortable with. And I think you put Okafor in a bad spot there and a play that probably didn't work to his strengths.
To me, here's what it comes down to. We've seen it when Embiid's been active. We saw it last night. Brett Brown and everyone in the NBA agrees that the Sixers' strength is with their big men. That's why they have this three-headed monster in the front court that is plaguing their future because they have to trade one. And Nerlens Noel is upset with the team, and he's in Virginia rehabbing. So clearly, those three guys are viewed as their most talented players. So at the end of ball games, that's where he's shown is trying to direct the ball in order to create a shot for those guys. The Thunder game when he traveled against, or the Magic game when Joel Embiid traveled against Bismack Biyombo was an absolutely phenomenal play by Brett Brown to get him the ball. There was like a triple screen action. There were two screens on the weak side, and then Embiid set a back screen, and then as he was cutting, another guy cut across to get him. I don't remember the exact same play, but he got him the ball in space on the block perfectly. It's just the results haven't been there, and if they were there, I don't think we're having this conversation. If they're there, I don't think you're asking for Hollis Thompson, a guy who went undrafted in the league, to shoot the ball over a top 3 pick. I think that's you're begging for Hollis Thompson to take the game-winning shot. Like, that's why Brett Brown. These are the cards he's been dealt. I think he's done the best job he could do. He's also juggling, like we mentioned, essentially. He's coaching two teams simultaneously. Because when Okafor and Embiid are both active, they can't play together, and they're both only available for 24 minutes. And then when Embiid's not playing or Okafor's not playing, it's an entirely different team because they play differently when one or the other is not on the floor. Like, it's such an incredible, difficult task. I think we got to give them some credit.
Fair enough. You do bring up some good points, but I think, and just to change the topic a little bit, Brian Colangelo has branded this team as a team that's moving forward, that's ready to try and win some games now, that looks competitive, and they're an 0-7. The question is, does Colangelo's mentality put Brown on the hot seat? And if they continue, let's say they go 0-10, 0-12, is Brett Brown still here?
I wrote about it when they first brought Brian Colangelo in Phoenix. Mike D'Antoni got his start because Brian Colangelo was hired with an incumbent coach. They weren't happy, and they fired him. And they elevated D'Antoni to head coach. They hired Jim O'Brien for a reason. He's Brett Brown's lead assistant, but he's also, in their mind, a safety net in case things go wrong.
Which would be a terrible idea, but continue.
It would be a terrible idea, but it's absolutely a possibility. I think it would be, I tweeted this morning, I think it would be really irresponsible to make a fateful decision on Brett Brown's coaching acumen without seeing Ben Simmons in action. And even regardless of that, without Joel Embiid being able to play 30 minutes a night. So I hope it doesn't happen, but it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from. And I think O'Brien, who's not a player's coach, who didn't really fare that well, he did take the team to the playoffs in his 1 year here, but there was a lot of issues in the locker room. It seemed like he's not a player's coach. He'd be a weird mesh for this young group of guys. I do think that the pressure is on Brett to win, even with this roster in not being at full health. And I would like to see what he can do with Simmons, especially because they're connected together, great family and friends. Brett knows Ben and his parents very, very well. And Jared Bayless too, who could be a really big part of this offense. So I am willing to see, and I do want to see what this team can look like when they get here. The question is, do I think Brian will give him that chance? And then if they don't have a win by Thanksgiving, I can't see him putting up with this just because of the connection with Simmons and stuff like that. I think he's got to try and make it work with what he has, whether, you can blame the town or not, but they have backed themselves into this corner by firing Hickey, by bringing in Brian that says, we're trying to make change now. We're trying to become a viable team now. And continuing to lose like this in the fashion that they did in previous years does not link up with that. And the only thing that would make sense under this new sort of results-oriented team, this results-oriented franchise, is that you got to try and find a new coach. And that's where I think that Brian Colangelo would make a move if they don't have a win by around Thanksgiving time.
Well, they get a chance tomorrow night versus the Pacers with Embiid. So
very true. I mean, again, they hung in with them. Who knows what would have happened if Embiid was there? Hopefully they can pull it out. I think they're desperate for a win. I think we're all desperate for a win. Hopefully they can pull it out. This was a quick edition of Hoops Hangout. We wanted to get some stuff off our chest. I think we had a good, productive conversation. I'm starting to lean more middle in terms of Brett Brown.
There we go.
I think you talked me off the ledge a little bit. There are definitely some issues there, but at the same time, I think I think people need to start evaluating Brett Brown for some of his decision making as well, as opposed to just continuing to say that, you know, this is the cards he's dealt with. You can only do so much, but there should be a middle ground of that. Agreed. There should be some sort of middle ground. Can we agree on that?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, great.
Have a good one, man.
All right. Yep. Everyone take care. Thanks for watching. We'll try and do this again soon.